You were going to meet an artist today that's going to blow your socks off. Lori Putnam, welcome to day number 178 and happy Saturday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, and I appreciate you taking a Saturday. I know that you have so many places you have to be.
Yes, in my front yard, in my backyard, in my, you know, front yard again.
So, what has quarantine life been like for you?
We're really lucky because we live on 5 acres in the country, so social distancing is not really a big problem for us. And my husband is able to work from home. He works in the loft as a studio every day, and so we're really, really very fortunate that our staying home. I had actually planned to stay home this year and paint in the studio anyway.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm more busy just because of all of the online teaching and things like that. But I'm enjoying being home. It's going to be hard going back to being a travel all the time person whenever that
Yeah.
is.
Well, I've kind of decided I'm not going to do that. As you know, I was out 30, 40 weeks a year. And I just, after being home all this time, I just don't want to do it anymore. It's
Mhm.
like I realized that I was running from something. I was like just staying busy and going places and realized, I just love being home. Of course, being able to reconnect with the kids and because they were forced home, they're in college now. But anyway, so what are you going to talk about today? We'd love to see what you're going to do.
Well, one of the things I seem to experience most when I'm teaching are people who want to get, like the eyelashes on the frog on the table before they think about the big picture. And so I want to talk about ways to make a painting solid from the beginning. So if you decide you want to put eyelashes on that frog, that's up to you at the end. But if you start with that, the whole thing's going to fall apart. So mostly design.
Okay, good. Well, I'm looking forward to that. And would you be willing, if you're able, I don't know if you are, would you be willing to kind of give us a view of your studio and maybe some
Sure.
paintings?
Sure, sure. Let me see if
You
I
don't
don't know
have to
if I
do it now. I'll tell you what, I'll drop off.
okay,
I'll drop you off. I'm going to make a couple of announcements and then
okay.
we can do that. You can figure out how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it. It's up to you.
If I can I don't know if I can turn the camera around, but we'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
I don't know. Well, you'll have a minute to figure that out, and so
Okay.
we'll
All right.
see you in a minute. Our guest today is Lori Putnam. This is a painting to give you a feel for some of her style. This is a painting she did in this video called Bold Brushstrokes and Confident Color. And what I'd like to do is bring her on now. Lori, welcome back.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks. It's really good to be here. It's just good to see you.
That's good. I was thinking the same thing. We talk once in a while, but we haven't really done a video thing. And you were talking about how you're busier now than you were before, even though you're not traveling. And that's because you're doing a lot of online teaching. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so I ended up, because there was so much going on online that was sort of covering up my art website, that I created a completely different website for all of my online teaching. So it's easy to remember. It's loriputnam.online. How cute. But anyway, and so if you go there, you'll see all that's going on. But I started just very simply. I was already doing a little bit of it anyway, well before this started. And then once things, I saw this need really. I started doing things for people that were pretty budget friendly. I wanted to sort of, I have to pay for all of, what it's like. You've got all these programs you have to pay for every month to be able to do this. But I wanted to be able to do it as inexpensively as possible so that, people, it was like giving back, something. And obviously there are some things I do that are also to make money. But at any rate, I ended up doing a lot of live workshops. As a matter of fact, I'm done with that right now. Yay, because I really need to paint. But a lot of live workshops and a lot of like I have a private atelier online that just for watching today, you can join that. You just got to tell me where you heard. That's what you got to do. It's on Facebook. But anyway, so if what all of these things I've been doing have been everything from just little 3 minutes, you don't really have a lot of time, to 2 hour lessons. And it's amazing how much equipment you have to get and how much time it takes to do something that seems really pretty simple, hopefully, to the people watching it. But I've really enjoyed it.
Well, you're fortunate to have a techie husband that helps out too. I would imagine that.
Oh, no, no, no.
No, it was you. Oh, well, excuse me. I guess that was very sexist of me. I apologize. I know that Mark has been very involved in your tech in the past, so you had to do all this on your own.
Yeah, he's got his
Yeah.
own job.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's right. Well, I'm proud of you. Yes, it's. I mean, we have at our production studios now. We have a sound stage. We've probably got over $1 million worth of equipment. It just
Yeah.
and that's how, and there's nothing wrong with charging for something. I mean, you have to get your expenses
Yeah.
money back and your time back. And of course, what people don't understand is that artists oftentimes are not selling as much artwork in this time. Now, some are, and you probably are, but at the same time, artists oftentimes make their money from live workshops. I can't go out and do them. We all have to make a living. So, well,
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. Good job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about what. Well, first off, where did you and I meet? I was trying to think about this. Was it at the first plein air convention?
No, it was in the Adirondacks. I mean, that's the first time we officially met. Was I came to the Adirondacks one
So
June.
that had to be pretty early on.
Yeah, it was. It was. And you had not. You were talking about. You were putting together this thing that you were going to have like a plein air convention sort of thing, and so you hadn't had the first one yet.
Okay. So well, that was the convention is now 9 years ago. Technically 10 by the time we have it, even though it'll be the ninth annual. So you must have been in the like the first Adirondack event because it would have been 10 years this year.
Yeah, must have been. Must have
Yeah.
been. It was, and I came and just, you know, was a little bit nervous, I guess, because I didn't really know what it was going to be. Um, and it was just so much fun. And you and I passed a few times, and spoke, but we really didn't meet until, like officially until like the very end. You're just, you're everywhere. And I was just ready to paint. I just wanted to paint. And at the very end, we had like maybe a 15-minute conversation in the kitchen of the guest house, I guess, the
Right.
cabin.
Right.
Um, and that was really the longest conversation we had there.
Yeah.
Because at dinner we might all be at the same table, but there's everybody talking. And
Right.
so that's our first real official conversation where we got to
I'm
know each other
sorry
a
for
little
not
bit.
remembering that. I can very clearly remember when you stood up when I was on stage at the plein air convention in Monterey. I think it was Monterey. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I was in Monterey several years. I was even at the first one.
Oh, you
Um,
were in Las Vegas.
mhm,
Okay, so well,
yeah,
maybe that's the time I remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We've known each other a long time now, and have developed a great friendship, and have spent a lot of time together since then. And so, anyway, thanks for doing this today. What are you going to show us?
so a lot of times what I see in my classes or when somebody will send me work to critique, they put together in their minds what they want to paint, but it doesn't come across on the canvas because they didn't plan ahead. And so immediately they're moving to the tiniest shapes possible. And by shapes, it could be a literal shape of like a leaf, or it could just be a dash, whatever, but it's a shape, it's a mark. And they start wanting something to look like something so quickly that they miss a lot of the foundational things. And so I generally have them make a thumbnail sketch, and which, works pretty well the first couple of days of the workshop. And then by the third day, they think they've got it and they stop doing that. And that's not good, um, because then it all falls apart again. And so if you can have a really good foundation that you're painting from, particularly in plein air, but I do it in the studio as well. If you have a really good solid design, then you can take all the time you want to put in your little marks, and however you want to make your little marks, and however detailed or full of information you want your personal style painting to be. But people seem to be, I guess there's some ego that gets in the way or something. They don't want to look stupid by having these big squares that look like, pieces of construction paper of a first grader or something. But it's so important. Otherwise, especially in plein air, you tend to get, sort of romanced by the new thing that's happening, and you start chasing the light, and you start putting in all these little things, and you just really want to finish that one part. And then what I find is the values, and I know there are all levels listening in. So the values, that is how light or dark things are. The big value shapes fall apart. They just crumble, and it's like having brick block under your house that was never cured. It just starts to fall apart, and everything goes away, and you don't have a strong foundation anymore. And so, if you can just discipline yourself to take the 10 to 15 minutes that it takes to figure out the foundational part, and that is your thumbnail sketch, then you can enjoy the painting part and not be so fearful of losing it.
Inevitably, Lori, I oftentimes will have a painting and I can't figure out what's wrong with it. And I usually will reach out to a friend, somebody like you, and I'll say, I can't see it. What's wrong with it? And every single time they come back with the same answer, and that is, you've lost your big shapes. Go back and get your big shapes in, and it will read properly.
Well, yeah, I still get brush happy, and because it's the fun part, right? And so, I've said a million times, a lot of times, the end of the painting for me is taking something back out because I just got a little too brush happy and lost that foundation. And I see it so often. And I think part of it is just like I said, the ego of it. Maybe what if somebody sees this looking so silly? Part of it is fear, that if you don't get something that looks like something, then it's not going to work. But the opposite is true. You have to think, foundation, and then you start to put in the framing, which is the medium shapes. And then finally, when you finally get all the big pieces and the framing and all that done, then you can put on the door handles. But you don't put on the door handles first.
Yeah, okay, but I want to talk about a couple of things that you brought up because I think they're really important. You have you talked about the performance aspect, right? We're worried about what other people think. This is especially true in a plein air environment. If we're painting next to other artists, if we're in a group setting, or if there are consumers who are wandering around behind us, we're worrying more about what they think than what we're doing. How do you overcome that?
Yeah. I'm not sure that I have a really good answer for that because I still fall victim to it sometimes, and when I do that, I'm always beating myself up at the end that I did something sort of out of sequence because I was manipulated to feel I needed to do that. And it's so important not to, but every time you go that route, it is so disappointing. And it's easy to say, just don't just don't care what anybody thinks. That's easy to say until, especially if it's like a quick draw or something. Like you say, there are people milling about and looking at what you're doing and thinking, wow, how did this person get in this event? But it's it's in the end, if you can just remember that you've pulled it off before, you've gotten to the finish line before, and it worked, and believe in yourself.
I have found a trick that works for me. First off, I do care what other people think. It's unfortunate, but I do. And I have found the worst thing for me is if I look at what the other artists are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I like to take a break, walk away from my canvas. And the one thing I used to do is I kind of wander around and look at what all the other artists were doing. And every single time it's like, oh, I like the way she did that tree, or that light on that tree, or I like the way he did those bricks. And then I come back and I start messing with my painting and trying to put those things in. And I completely mess up the concept because I'm taking their ideas, putting them into my painting, and it's not my painting anymore. So I have found that I just tell myself, I'm not looking at anybody else's work until, or once in a while I'll glance at somebody else's work, but I have to say to myself, look, I am not changing direction now. And having that original drawing, that original note, and really makes a big difference, because then you're like, this is my foundation, this is my roadmap. You want to talk about notans?
Yeah, and that's really where I was going to go next. A lot of times people will try to force um, will try to force a scene into the notan. The notan, which is just a shape of light and a shape of dark, and how they design together um, to make the sketch, the thumbnail sketch. It's not the little pieces, it's the big pieces. The way they go together really only works in a situation that you have like strong light and shadow, front light, something that can be divided into a light and a dark pattern. And so, whether that's just light and dark, or whether it's light and shadow, which could be two totally different things, we don't have time to get into all that today. That's when you'd use a notan. And so you would try very hard then to choose a design that is very strongly clear. This is my dark piece and this is my light piece, and get that in. And it also helps you because, especially in plein air, because the sun keeps moving, right? So if you get that design in your head and on paper, you don't tend to chase it, when the light starts to move. And so the notan is two big shapes. I see the confusion I see sometimes is when people talk about notans to mean something with three values, and that's no longer a true two-piece statement anymore. It's a three-piece statement. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit further down because I don't want to confuse you just yet. But so I have a couple of examples. Can I go ahead and go to those and talk about that just a minute?
Absolutely. You've got about 25 minutes.
Okay, great. So I have a couple of examples here of paintings that I've just recently done that are good sources for a notan design. And now I have some thumbnail sketches up here. Normally my thumbnails are not that big. Normally they're very, very small. And I put together these little sketchbooks for my students because inevitably they would do a thumbnail sketch that was square for a rectangular canvas or something. And so they have different measurements on them and places for the students to take notes. And I had these sketchbooks made for them. And so that's generally the size of my thumbnail sketch. And I like to use these markers that have a different value on each end. If you can see that, there's a little bit different value on one end than the other.
What is the brand on the marker? Because everybody's going to ask.
It's one of those Zig markers is the company, and it's called Brushables.
Okay.
And so it's
somebody put that in the comments, please.
So
crushable.
I can easily even we may not get to key today, but I can easily even decide, if it's a lighter value key painting or a darker or somewhere in between with just two markers. Um, so that's generally how I would make my thumbnail sketches. But in order for you to be able to see this today, I redid my sketches for you here much larger. And so we're going to talk about this piece first. You can see the light's a little glary there, but this is a scene from Staves, England, coast of Yorkshire. And I'll be going back there to teach again next year. I love teaching there. It's so gorgeous. It's a beautiful paintable place. And
Okay, I'm going
um,
with you.
yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's a painter's paradise, and all the great painters that painted there. So it's really, really glad Simi at Rosemary Brushes asked me to go back again. But anyway, and we only have like 3 spots left, so hurry up. But anywho, um, and so this, if I can get this where there's not too much glare, this entire piece, all of this, is represented with one big shape here in this no tan. Now I drew a little light line there. I don't know if you can appreciate it, but I drew that just so I remembered where the top of this landmass back here sort of comes in, because in my design I wanted to make sure I didn't have the same amount of space here as I had here and some stuff like that. But basically what you need to have on your foundational sketch is not any detail. The detail's in front of you. It's not going anywhere, that unless it's a person, and then it might. But this is what you need. Now if I take the 10 minutes it takes to nail that, then I can enjoy this. And at this time of day, that light moves really quickly. So if I like that shape when I see it, I need to go ahead and do the sketch and pay attention to that sketch. Now, also you'll see in my thumbnail sketches that I do, you'll see that I make some notes down at the bottom of that little booklet. And I've made those here as well. And this is something that you would make either from a photograph or from observation from life. You'd go ahead and make yourself a few notes, because unless you have painted, 6,000 plein air pieces, your visual memory is not going to hold that. You think it will, but it won't. Inevitably, you will forget something. And so what I have written here in my side of my notes is that the lights, that's everything in this shape, right, are a value between 20 and 30%. If you use the Munsell scale, that's a 7 or 8, but I generally don't. But I just wanted to say that in case somebody's thinking about that. But it's, to me, the lightest piece here is only 20 to 30% darker than pure white. And I've written here that the value of the shadows is between 40 and 70. There are 40 and 70 different little things in here. The important thing to note is that the 30, the darkest light, and the 40, the lightest shadow, are a full step apart. And as long as I keep that relationship and don't put anything up in here that is supposed to be here, and anything up in here that's supposed to be here, I'm good. I'm really golden.
Okay, but I'm gonna ask you a question about that. Okay, so I'm looking at this piece, and so I'm looking at your dark shape, and I'm saying, okay, there's not a pure dark in, according to your notes, there's not a pure dark in it. But what about things like you have like the edge of the dock or the windows? They look like they're a pure dark. Is that an exception to that rule? So it's like darks on top of darks?
Actually, there are a few little tiny dark accents in here. And the tiny dark accents, might be like this edge right here. And this edge is what gives you some distance between here and here, because all of this is so similar.
Yeah.
But the majority of this, and this is my next note. It's like you know what I'm going to say.
I
My
do. I
next
always know
note
what people are
says
going to say.
says that the majority of the value is 50% or darker. And so even though it looks really dark in here, most of this is really hovering around 50%, right in the middle.
And it would really change it. I was thinking about that. Looking at this now, it would really change it if it was too dark.
Yes. Yeah, oh, yes. And a lot of people do that. Um, that's just the way their thought process is. But I can remember uh, a real aha moment for me was once I was painting with Scott Christensen out in Carmel, and I had, a distant rock, you know, further away than this, and I had a shadow really, really dark. I mean, I didn't think it was that dark, but, I probably had it this dark. And he said, I want you to get down and look at this bush right in front of you. And I want you to look at how dark that deepest dark of that little piece of shadow is, those little tiny dark accents, and compare that to this. And it was like, a million steps apart. And so I think sometimes because we're staring at this next to so much light, our tendency is to make that too dark. But it's really not. I mean,
Makes a lot of sense.
this is one step above mid value back
Well,
there.
I was looking at shadows this morning. A really beautiful sunny day here in the Adirondacks. And I was looking at shadows, and I noticed there was a shadow projected from one house onto the other house. And the other house was in full light. And my brain was tricked because I told myself, well, a shadow is dark. But that shadow was very transparent, had a lot of light in it, and it was not a huge step from the light. If the light was a 20, this was a 35 or something. It wasn't so
Right.
super deep. But I think we train our brains to think shadows are dark, but not all shadows are dark.
No,
Remember
and
that
even
show when we were kids? Maybe you're too young, but there was a show called Dark Shadows.
I'm not that young. I think
I wouldn't admit that.
I think we're probably, I don't know, maybe we're the same age. I don't know. I may be older than you. I've certainly got
I never tell.
grayer hair than you. Um, by the way, I really like the gray. The salt pepper is a good thing.
Yeah, well, I went through a phase. I went through a phase where I was really freaked out, and I started dyeing my hair, and I looked like one of those old people that dyes their hair, and I thought, oh, I hate it.
Yeah, good for
Yeah.
you. Good for you. Okay, back to the lesson.
All right.
So in this one, what makes this distance, what makes set back so far is this hard edge right here. That is the only real 70% in the whole piece. And so, not only do I need this foundation here, I need these notes, and then I need to know what I'm going to do to push that back so that it doesn't just all look exactly the same. And ironically, this was painted on a board that had already had something painted on it, just reusing old materials. And a lot of this is what was left from wiping off the painting before, and it was just the right value. So
Do,
that was luck.
do you find that you push values, or you push things back further than what you see them so that you create the sense of distance? Because some artists will do that. It's like, even though it's a little closer, it doesn't read as far enough away, so you lighten it and push it back a little bit more? Or do you always try to paint what you see?
I try well, it depends on if I'm creating or if I am documenting. For instance, most of the time in plein air, I'm learning and documenting. In the studio, I might try something just to be more creative. I might, take a lot of things that are up here and use them to say something else that I want to say that isn't in any photo I've ever seen necessarily. It's just experience. And so I think it just depends on the situation. I won't say I never do it, but generally speaking, like I really wanted this. There is a lie in this. but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But I really wanted this to feel like the character of the place.
Why,
And
why would you say it's a lie? In other
oh,
words, you're saying because there's something that you put in that wasn't there, or something you
right,
took out.
right.
Well,
Yeah, you
you
really,
know,
yeah.
you're
I
an
mean,
artist. You're not necessarily.
yeah,
You're trying to make a good painting.
that's right. And that's why I had to figure out the design here and not be just a slave to, you know, but I have to put that other little thing there, or, you know, because nobody's going to know. Nobody is going to know if they look at this unless they were standing there going, that's impossible. You can't even see that part of that building. You know, they're not going to know. Everybody knows this scene, and I've made some changes, but that is reflected here in this design, you know, to begin with. So what I did then is I took a photograph of this, and just for your benefit, printed it out in black and white. And so you can really see how all of this holds together so well here when you squint down. And yeah, this does look darker, but these values within this shape, there's three whole steps that I can work with according to my notes. In this shape, there's only one step. And so by keeping this, the part where I have added, you know, some interest in terms of little subtle shifts of value, but I've got three steps to do that. And back here, keep everything much closer. I mean, if you could see this top of this and the sky, I'm sure you can appreciate that, but they're really about the same value. So I've only got two steps back here. So I hope that makes some sense. But I planned all
Perfect
of
sense.
that ahead of time to be able to do this painting. So now the difference, this is going to be the fun part. The difference in this painting, I'm just going to scoot that over, and this painting is very little, but they're clearly two different types of day, right? You can tell that, you know, this first one was, you know, later in the day, the sun's going to be setting soon, and this looks more like, you know, bright, sunshiny day, right? But if you look at the values, and I've done my sketch here, again, my thumbnail sketch. The values in these lights, I got very specific when I sampled this. The values in these lights go all the way up from 8% to 38%. So a much bigger range there than up here. The shadows are 38 to 85. And the majority of this painting is 30% or lighter. So what I'm telling you is that the lights go to 38% and the shadows go to 38%. And it is that meeting of those together that make this a totally different feel than this first painting where there was a whole step between the light and the shadows.
You've completely confused me. Um, I so 38% in light and 38% in dark is that
Yes,
what you're
yes.
saying?
So this value right here is 38%. So it's almost a 4 if you had if one was white.
Okay.
If you're doing Munsell, it would be a 6, right? But we're not
Yeah.
going to do that. Okay, so
Okay.
this is almost 40, just under 40, and so is this. These, if you put them right next to one another without this little bit of dark in here, they
They'd be
would
the
be the
same.
same value.
Really. Okay. So now, but your light is also
So,
a 38.
or all the way down to an 8. It goes way on down. This is the lightest light
Yeah.
next to the darkest dark.
Yeah. But what's confusing me, I think I must be doing something wrong in my head because 38% light, which you said is about a 4,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yes.
38% dark, which is about what?
A 4.
A 4. But how can those be the same value because one's light and one's dark?
Well, because they're so far apart, and there's this dark piece right here that
Oh,
leads you
I
to
guess I was
believe
thinking, I thought you were referring to that bright yellow spot in the corner of that building.
this light is lighter, but
Okay.
this light
All
back
right.
in
So
here and
the
this,
distance light is the same light, but it's just reading lighter because it's against the darks.
yes.
Okay.
And so I know it's crazy. It's crazy that we have to actually think. People think that we don't even have to think. But what happens now is the same way in the first painting, 2/3 of this thing, more than that, were in shadow. They were 50% or more. But up here, because we can include this in not in our thumbnail sketch, but in our decision-making process about where the majority of the values fall. Are you with me?
Yeah.
The majority of the values, even though some of them are in shadow, are just a little bit lighter than a 4.
Okay.
And so it gives the appearance of all of this seeming very light, even though in the notan, the 2 value, it is a part of the shadow shape.
Well, I'll tell you, that helps so much. It really does, because I always struggle with things like distant trees, and I know they're a darker value, but I want to make them feel more distant. And so I think that helps a lot, because now it's more about placing darks in front of them.
Yeah, well, and there are a lot of that's one of the many ways to do it. And I think the more we experiment, the more we find other ways to do it. And that's what's fun for me is saying, how can how can I be an illusionist? How can I give this feeling of whatever so that the message I want to say is evident without necessarily always jumping to the same little trick,
Yeah,
but
right.
learning other ways. And like a lot of times, of course, imagine uh, sometimes you've been in a situation where, the sky is fairly dark and there's a dark row of trees, but there's a beautifully illuminated front of a barn in shadow, and it's, the background is lighter. I mean, is dark, excuse me, background is darker. And so, how can I make that illusion work by playing with these values and edges, what sits next to what and what is separated from something else. And so the thing to do, of course, is to make a whole lot of different thumbnail sketches and then make some notes and then try them in little small pieces before you get out the real canvas and start working on
You've
it.
actually illuminated something that I've never really understood about the value of notans, and it really is making sense now. So thank you for that. I
Yeah.
kind of derailed your conversation, so you got about
No, no,
5 minutes left now.
that's
So
fine.
I'm
That's
going to
fine.
let you do what you want to do, and I'll
That's
drop
fine.
out.
Okay. I want to show just real quickly. I did not do a thumbnail sketch of this one, but as people watch this, or maybe if they rewatch it, I would like for them to just take a look at this and try to figure out on your own. It's your little lesson to try to figure out on your own what I have done here. I want you to make a thumbnail sketch, and I want you to come up with, what you think are my little percentages here. And let me just set that aside. Hope you got to see that. Now, the thing I did not talk about that I want to talk about for just a minute, and that is I get asked all the time from people, well, what do you do with flat light? So far, you've talked about light and shadow. And we mentioned earlier that sometimes a notan is not exactly what you need. And so I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. My husband did build my easel. He gets credit for that. And I have this little thumbnail sketch here. And you can see, hopefully you can see that I've got three values.
Can you bring it real close to the camera?
Sure. See, there's
Okay,
three.
three values, right.
Three values. And you can already tell that that's cows against the background, can't you? It's just three little values.
I couldn't tell until you told me.
Yeah, right. And I do have, this will be a little more difficult for you to see probably, but let me show you. The image that came from is just on my iPad here, but you can see that it's cows against the background.
Okay.
And so I need three values to tell that story. It is not about light and shadow because there's no real shadow except underneath these cows. And it's so subtle that it's not about harsh light and shadow like all of these other paintings were, right? So in this case, I need three values to tell this story. I still don't need any details. I just need to know, the pattern of the little white heads and that the background back here where the trees are in the photo, the trees and the cow bodies really are the same value. And that this grass sits somewhere darker than their faces and lighter than the background. And
Cool.
so I've written myself a note that this is not light and shadow. It's three values, and that the ground plane is about 50%. This whole big dark shape without the faces, this whole big dark shape is about 70%, and their little faces are about 20%. And so that's how you would design that. Now, just to let you know that I'm trying not to have an ego here. I'm going to show you what that looks like if you blocked it in, even with people looking, okay? So I've got that done ahead because I knew we didn't have a lot of time. And so that's what that looks like when you block that in. And I have my little palette that I have mixed, pre-mixed just for you. Let's see if you can see that without too much glare.
Yep. Thank you.
Do you see that the reddish orange and the green that are in the dark are the exact same value?
They are, yes.
And then this grass is this lighter value.
I would have not thought it was that light, but now, seeing it on the palette, I wouldn't have thought that, but seeing it on the painting, yes, it does that.
And so by knowing that what value my palette is about a 6, and I needed this piece to be a 7. So I just mixed pile that's one step darker. I got one pile of green that's got some red in it just for color harmony, and one pile of reddish that's got a little green in it for color harmony. And then I knew that this pile, I already decided what value that pile had to be so I can compare it to my palette. And I had decided it needed to be like a 50. So it's one step lighter than my palette. And I've just filled that in. And all I have left to do is, cut some little shapes to make legs and paint a face.
Well, it really simplifies things, doesn't it? It makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. So, I can't say enough what it could mean to you if you just take some time to plan a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's been very helpful. I want to thank you for doing this, Lori. And people can find all about you at your website, which is LoriPutnam.com.
Yeah, that's my
and then
artwork.
your other website is LoriPutnam.online, which is where your online teaching is. Also, Lori has a video with us, and you can find it at lilypubs.com or lilyartvideo.com. And I'll just show that video, which was, I don't know, we did this about 5 or 6 years ago, I'm guessing. And it's bold brush strokes and confident color. This is the image from that painting. So, Lori, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a pleasure to reconnect, and we need to do this more often.
Yeah, that would be fun. Thank you so much. It's been good to see your little face.
Okay, you guys, applause and thumbs up for Lori Putnam, and make sure you visit her website, loriputnam.com or loriputnam.online. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Eric.